New Genesys format could change Master Duel forever. There's a lot to talk about with the new officially announced format by Konami that has just received a major update today since its announcement a few days ago. I'll be getting deep into the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's hop right in as we're going to be talking about what is the Genesys format, how serious is Konami with this, what will it accomplish, will hand traps and board breakers be unusable, will bad decks and bad cards be good now, what major mistakes have they already made, they have made them, is this doomed to fail, is it non-interactive, and most importantly, when will this come to Master Duel? Well, on YugiOhMeta.com, we have the official implementation on the deck builder, and you could also use the card search. You click on the Genesys tab to see the points here. You could also click on TCG, OCG, and then type in Genesys points, and it will apply the points. You could also sort by, let's say, a maximum point value or a minimum or exact. So we want at max to see cards that are just 5 points instead of the other. So the most popular 5-point card of the TCG is Draw and Lockbird, alongside that Ghost Ogre. Well, Pot of Greed is playable at 3, but it will cost you 90 freaking points. So as you can see here, it would be much better, likely a lot more advantageous to instead play a lot of these other cards instead of using up your many powerful spots of up to 100 points on just Pot of Greed. And what's quite interesting here is Konami thinks that Pot of Prosperity is better. You dig off the top of your deck 6 cards instead of drawing 2, +1 with Pot of Greed, where it's a 1-for-1 with Pot of P. You could not play 3 of the Pot of P. And mind you, nothing is banned in this format except across the board, all Link monsters and all Pendulum monsters, they're completely banned. But beyond that, everything is legally playable. If I were to look at Graceful Charity, that's a big one. Graceful Charity at 40 points. So you can legally play 2 copies of Graceful Charity, draw 3, then discard 2. Back then, we didn't have that many cards that would interact with the graveyard. Now, we had Sinister Serpent, that was great, but even more so today. And this discards by card effect. That will trigger Tearlaments, but then if we look at the main engine of Tearlament, how many cards are going to be hit there? Holy moly, this is pretty much unplayable. What? You have a cap of 100 points, Kick Cal at 50, and every tier that's relevant also at 50. So this is a good little sneak peek on how this format will work out. And we're going to have a $1,000 tournament qualifier with the new Genesys format, where Pot of Greed obviously is playable at 3 on twitch.tv/Decade. We also have a new subreddit if you want to be using that to discuss the new format, Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesys. I'll put a link to that. Now, let's start off with what is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesys format. Starting off with the 262,000 all-time player peak of Master Duel's release. That is millions of different players checking out the game for the first time. This is a huge sign to Konami that the players are out there if you put forth something that they want to play. Now, unfortunately, we have severely dropped from there. Not only dropped, we are at the lowest numbers ever. 12,000 average of the last 30 days. From 2023 to 2024, we did not lose players. Only within 2025 is the player base absolutely plummeting, and Konami's got to think of something quick to stop the bleeding. Now, with all the people checking out the game initially, they were going, what the heck is this? Extra monster zones? I don't remember this in the anime or even in the last time they played. Well, that's why with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesys format, they're removing the extra monster zones. The field is going to look like this, where also in Master Duel, the spell and trap zones are squished. They're not even the same size as the monster zones. I know myself, coming from dueling some Master Duel, this is quite jarring to have the extra monster zones, and I think it does make the field a bit more ugly. And now I've obviously gotten used to it, but for many others, they're never going to get used to it. They just don't want to play it. And with the extra monster zones also being removed, as I said earlier, Link Summoning and Pendulums have been completely removed. Now, before you get too excited, Konami is no stranger to failure. Let's look at some of those failures. We have Speed Duel. Remember that? We're not talking about Duel Links. We're talking about the physical Speed Duel product, which has officially been concluded. They are no longer going to be making it. And a big problem with the Speed Duel format for the physical card game is it didn't really have good tournament support. There was no official YCSs for it from my memory. Now, you could be saying that's why it failed. Well, there's something that did have official YCS support that also failed, and that is the Battle Pack. Battle Pack had official main event YCS support. Day one, main event, you had to draft random cards from multiple different packs of the Battle Pack. And then if you did well enough day one, you make it to day two with the deck you brought to the event, which would be standard Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously, this failed. They tried to copy Magic the Gathering. It did not work out. And then we have some controversy with Time Wizard. What the heck is this? Time Wizard is essentially a 10-year-old format that many people in the player base play under the name of Edison. And this is what an Edison format deck would look like. And not only are we using older cards, we're also using older rules and older card effects. For example, Goyo Guardian has been changed where it used to be any tuner, now it's an Earth tuner, so it's not really summonable in this deck. Another rule change was something like Dark Arm Dragon. It's a spell speed 1, destroy a card in the field. Well, on your summon of Dark Armed or another monster, you have player priority to activate this similarly to a trigger effect, or you could say a spell speed 2 effect, where the opponent cannot respond with Bottomless or Book of Moon until you activate your Dark Arm to pop a card in the field, which is absolutely insane. And I think there was a lot of issues with judging these old rules that confused a lot of players and a lot of the judges. So Konami decided, hey, we're going to use the current game mechanics for Time Wizard. And then players are going, what the heck? I'm not going to play in that then. The only reason I'm playing this is to preserve the full integrity of what the game was that many years ago. Well, Konami then, after a backlash, backtracked on it. And I think a main reason for this change, besides issues with judging, is this format doesn't really make Konami money. So Konami had to think, how do we create something similar to Time Wizard, but also makes money, which means we're going to have players buy the newest product, because we don't want to make new product again like Speed Duel, new product again like Battle Pack. That didn't work out. And that's where we have the new Genesys format, where they are on the release of brand new cards going to assign point values to the powerful cards. That's something I'm going to be revealing later in this video, which is quite crazy, because normally cards are not added to a ban list until they've been released for a little bit. And essentially they're going to be ban list hit immediately only within this format. So what else we have here? This is a format they've been working on for over 2 years. This shows commitment, that they actually care about this format, as you can see on the article on Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta. And also, what about YCS support? This will soon be coming to a YCS level tournament. It's going to be in 2026. There will be an official YCS for it. Otherwise, it will be a YCS side event for the YCSs before then. And this is an example where if you wanted to have a card like Triple Tactics Talent in your deck, how weird you'd have to make your deck. We have Ogre at 5 points, Keldo at 1 point, and then the Triple Tactics Talent at 93 with Pot of Greed at freaking 30 points. And let's say you wanted to have a card like Triple Tactics Thrust add a talent. Well, they're not even playable together. Let's type in Thrust, Genesys, 13 points plus 93 points. That does not work out. Now, what exactly did Konami get this idea from of this point value? So you can see a nice overview of all the cards here. Whoops, that jumped over here. 100-point card. So you play one Abyss Dweller, that's it. You can't play any other card that has a point value. So essentially all these cards are limited to 1, but not only are they limited to 1, they then restrict you from playing any other card. So if you scroll on down to 33 points would essentially be limited to 3. And then you would be done after playing 3 of any of these cards from adding any other cards from the point system to your deck. And we have cards all the way down to 1 point value. So what Konami did that was quite smart was they took some cards that would have infinite loops or broken combos like the Elma dagger, and whatever they comboed with would be 100 points, which thus means 101 points, not being a legal deck. And that's why they could get away with having no ban list whatsoever besides Links and Pendulums being banned. Now, we have the idea of the system, I would say, is from Duel Links. Here's an example of a top tier Duel Links deck. Shadow at tier freaking 1. How do you balance this in Duel Links? Well, you put a card like Wendy at 3. Now, for many of you that play just TCG or Master Duel, this makes no sense. Well, how it makes sense is if we type in limited to 3, and you'll see that a card like Book of Eclipse is limited 3, Dragon Prison limited 3, Needle Ceiling limited 3. Think of these cards like Ash Blossom and Impermanence. You have a goodie bag with 3 cards you could only pull out of, and that's it. So you reach in, you take 3 Wendy's, the bag closes. You cannot play anything else. And this is a good way for them to effectively balance a deck like Leerlusk, like Heroes. Now, Leerlusk gets more severe. You reach in the goodie bag, you could, for example, play just 1 Turquoise Warbler and then 2 Cobalt Sparrow, and that's it. Essentially, one of them being limited to 1 and the other being semi-limited by having them both being limited to 3. And the Genesys point system, being very similar to this, is also a lot more severe. And how this essentially works out to is that only the bad decks get to use the good techs. And then the good decks can't use the good techs. So it in a way has a self-balancing system. But even with that self-balancing system, it's not enough for the top tier decks to be equalized with the lower tier decks, as of course they just still stand above the rest, way beyond, even with the advantage of the weaker decks being able to use the powerful cards that are limited to 1, semi-limited, or limited to 3. Now, what's really good about the system is that the older banless system, or I should say the modern banless system, has a really bad issue with collateral damage. I think a great example is Foolish Burial Goods. This is a card that a deck like, I should say, Lunalight wanted to really play a 3, but it got hit to 1 because of tier limits. And now, for no reason whatsoever, not their fault, Lunalight now just became a weaker deck when it needs this support. And I have Gold Sark up here because it's about to happen with this. This card will be limited to 1, or it possibly will be banned, and it will be because of Malice, and then Branded and Thunder Dragon get to pay the price. Where if we have the dueling system or the Genesys point system, this is no longer a problem. You just assign this a point value, you make sure that Branded or Thunder Dragon's points inherently are not too high so that they could still fit the Gold Sark, and then you force Malice to not be able to play Gold Sark, but just assigning a bunch of 20 and 30 point values to their main cards. Now, moving on, what does this actually accomplish, even though we kind of addressed that a little bit? Will hand traps and board breakers be unusable, and will bad cards and bad decks be good now? So I have a few things to talk about this. What makes a good deck? Here are some random categories. I would say your deck's hand trap resilience, which is essentially your extenders and your non-engine, allowing you to essentially pass if they disrupt you. This could be a bunch of hand traps, so that would make you resilient to a hand trap and not lose the duel right away. Your maxi full loss resilience, which I don't think is really going to be a factor within the Genesys format, so you can knock that out. Your power ceiling, which will be your disruptions and quality of disruptions. I believe Genesys is trying to reduce the power ceiling. If we look at a powerful deck, which we're going to see some examples, I don't think any top tier recent deck can play their power ceiling to their fullest. And we're going to see the examples. Now, board presence, OTK capability, consistency of the deck, I think that's another thing that they're going to be reducing. So overall, the power ceiling goes down. Overall, the consistency goes down. Recursion being another level. I think this is a weaker one. And here's a major category. I think the main categories here are going to be power ceiling, consistency, and the hand trap turn 0 disruption / board breaker category. Now, a good deck excels in the hand trap turn 0 disruption category, the consistency, and the power ceiling. Malice is pretty much a 10 out of 10 on all 3. Well, the Genesys format says, nope. You cannot be excelling at all 3 anymore. You have to pick 1 or 2 over the other. Now, the best decks will probably be the most consistent and highest power ceiling, but they're going to have pretty much no hand traps whatsoever. Now, there's this copium that maybe the best decks will be the ones that aren't that consistent and don't have that high of a power ceiling, but they're able to have room to play all the powerful hand traps and turn 0 disruption like Imperm, Ash Blossom, Nibiru. We're going to check the point system on that and how reliable that is. Then, as I said early, this is probably the design philosophy of the Genesys, where good decks cannot use good techs, similar to Duel Links, and the bad / rogue decks can use the good techs like Imperm, Ash, Nibiru, etc. So let's move on to this. Here is an example of the most popularly used cards in the TCG and what their point value is. Now, of course, Link Summoning is banned. We have Ash at 15, Full Loss at 7, Imperm at 13, Nibiru at 10, Called by the Grave at 20 freaking points. That is crazy. I think a card like Zeus is a bit too overvalued here. This should probably get reduced 20 points to even play Zeus in your extra deck. That is insane. Now, new cards like the Ripper, I think this does deserve its point value. We have a little bit of the weaker hand traps. Even though Droll is more used than Valor, it's lower points than Valor. It actually got changed in a recent update today. We have Ogre and Bell. And even some hand traps potentially have 0-point values, which I definitely want to be showcasing to you. If we look at a deck like Fire King, this is probably the best you could build this. We have triple Ponyx, 10 points each, 2 Volcanics, 20 points each, and triple Kirin at 10 points each, a total 100 points. So immediately, you can't play Ash. You can't play Fulos, can't play Imperm. You cannot play Nibiru whatsoever. We have another example, Draco Tail. This is on the tier list, top 3 deck. This is what the deck looks like, and let's apply it to the point system of Genesys. Here's the example. While this card's played at 3, we can only afford to really play 1 or 2. It's 20 freaking points for the extra deck monster. And then the main deck, we have the Femina is 20 points, the Mululu at 5 points, and you could, with the search yourself, just type in Draco Tail, and it's going to automatically showcase the most prevalently used Draco Tail cards. Or even better, you could type in Draco Tail on the card type, and then it's going to include all the cards that are used in the deck entirely. And as you can see, there's no room. There's no way that you could build it close to what it is in the TCG. I mean, it's kind of close, but not enough. Now, what's interesting is, which I'm going to address later, is the key to Draco Tail was 0 points yesterday. Just 2 days ago, this was announced to be at 0 points. So you were able to play the deck like this. The deck is now 75 point. I guess it was a little bit more. Maybe I think we had 2 of this. So, yeah, this was a legal way to play the deck. 2, 2, 3, 3, and they had to make that adjustment. They also made some other adjustments. They made some major oversights, which we'll definitely be covering. If we're going to look at 0-point hand traps and board breakers, because you're getting the impression that I am possibly that in order to build the top tier decks, you're not going to have room for the good techs. So you're going to be looking at the lower tier techs, which are the 0-point ones. DD Crow is 0 points. Book of Moon is 7. You can't fit Book of Moon into what you would consider to be a good deck. What I think is insane here is the Ghost Reaper is 0 points. This looks at the opponent's extra deck, banish all copies of the same name that you reveal from your own extra deck. I bet that this will be assigned a point value soon. This had to be overlooked. Flying Sea probably also overlooked. We have Link Summoning and Pendulums banned, but this is anti-Xyz. Your opponent summons a monster, you special summon this to their field. They now cannot Xyz summon, and a main out would be linking this off. Well, Link monsters are banned, and Xyz summoning and synchros will be the most prevalent strategies. I guess the downside is if there's a very good synchro deck, they'll be able to synchro with this, but this will at least be used in the side deck. And now for my Master Duel events, we're not going to have a side deck. Skullmeister at 0 points, negate an engrave activation. Now, usually the prevalent engrave activating decks, they have many ways to chain link block their important effects because they activate multiple cards in the graveyard. So this may not be that great even against a deck that does activate in the grave. Retaliating Sea might be quite interesting. You special summon this after they activate a spell that special summons, and then any card sent to the grave is banished while face up. Lancia, definitely side deck material. If you're wondering, oh boy, is Mouse good in this? Well, links are banned, so obviously Mouse is not good. Chaos Hunter. Now, what's quite perplexing to me is Dark Ruler No More is 0 points. I feel that most decks are going to main deck 3 DD Crow and 3 Dark Ruler No More, because every other good board breaker is heavily restricted. If we look at Droplet, 10 points. If we look at Super Poly, 10 points. If you look at Lightning Storm, what's Lightning Storm at? 40 points. We already saw Thrust, one of the most popular cards, 93 freaking points. So this is quite insane. We have Terraforming right here at 33 points. Oh my Jesus. Now, why do I have these other cards here? Does DK not know that the runic cards don't work? I do know that you can't summon a runic to the extra monster zone because it does not exist, but that does not mean the runic cards are bad. If we don't have access to all these other good spells, then these cards being worth 0 points and alongside triple Fountain with triple Runic Tip, you really don't think that this will be a viable way to search for your one, a 1-for-1 board break of pop a special summon, negate a monster, or pop a back row, and then potentially draw up to 3? You don't think that's going to be insane? Now, Widow Anchor, of course, there's no extra monster zone, and you have to have no monsters on the field to activate this, but if I could activate 2 other spells, then activate Engage to draw an additional card in addition to grabbing my Widow Anchor to then negate and take control of one of the opponent's monsters that I could maybe Synchro or Xyz with, that's going to be quite insane. I'm not sure about Offerings to the Doom being good, but maybe it would be. Quick play spells that could be used, set turn 1 or used going second. Now, obviously, if you're going first, Widow Anchor is going to suck because any monster whatsoever makes this unusable. So maybe the Runic Engine and or Offerings could be a good idea of what we may see within the Master Duel tournament this Sunday. Now, I think you'd be pleased to find out that if we look at, I think we could just type in Floodgate here. Floodgate, Genesys, mate, yep, 100 points almost across the board for all the nasty, dirty Floodgates. Now, some of them are not 100. We have the Inspector Border, playable at 3, but that takes up 60 freaking points. You could play, I guess, 3 Border, 1 Necro Valley, but it's just 1 Necro Valley, 100 for Majesty's Fiend, but then there are some Floodgates that are not restricted, like Macro freaking Cosmos. And if we look at a card like Shifter, Shifter was accidentally announced to be 5 points. It's now 10 points, so they did go back on that. I thought it was meant to be maybe 55 points. They maybe forgot the other 5, but it was actually just undervalued as their own mistake. And now another crazy thing about this is what happens when new cards come out in the physical card game? They're not on the ban list unless there's a crazy circumstance like 6 cents on release was limited to 1. But otherwise, you have to wait for a ban list. Konami's not waiting. They are going to implement the power rating right away on the new card release. As you can see, coming on September 25th. That has not even happened yet. That's coming out tomorrow. And Dominus Spiral is already 10 points. You have K9 Noroi. So I'm sorting by release date and then minimum points 1. So you can do this yourself if you want to see all the newest cards that are hit with the power. And what's interesting about this, 10 points right away. So you would think that Konami's maybe would want to be pushing the new cards. Well, they possibly still are. Maybe this is something that should be 20 or 30 points and they're just giving it a little slap on the wrist for now. But all I could say is I am happy to see definitively that they are in fact looking at the new cards to apply a restriction to them on day freaking 1. That is nuts. Now, what mistakes have they already made? Is this doomed to fail? Will the duels just be non-interactive? I think we got a good showcase of the potential bad cards. Like, DD Crow's not really a bad card, but people maybe main deck and Skullmeister, using Offerings to the Doomed. I would say those are pretty bad cards, and they may actually be very good within the Genesys format. And what I'm also fearing for is, are they going to have knee-jerk reactions of, hey, you're not supposed to be playing Offerings of Doom. That was not supposed to be good. We're now going to assign a point value to that. How quick is Konami going to be? Are they going to be doing knee-jerk reactions? Because I'm going to showcase later, they are actually balancing this format on a 4 to 6 week rotation. I'm going to say the good and bad things about that in a bit. So let's see. What are the mistakes they made? Well, with them saying they've worked on this for over 2 years, you would think that, and also testing this externally and internally, that they would have maybe had a better announcement, a more balanced list of cards. But the community already got to work on things like this. What? So, ... this is legal in Genesys. Yes, this was legal until Konami's announcement today of, oh, hold up. In our 2 years of balancing this format, that we didn't know that Chicken Game draws 1. We didn't know Into the Void draws 1. We didn't know Dark World Dealings draws 1. Like, we just didn't know that you'd be able to consistently, possibly within Genesys, draw all 5 pieces of Exodia. Whoops. Thus, we have the point adjustment announcement on September 24th. So we look, this was announced on 22nd, the official format with the full point system. And then 2 days later, we made an oopsie. The ideal update thing is going to be 4 to 6 week range, but we had to do a big change. And how big is this change? Well, There's Chicken Game. There's Dark World Dealings. Demise of the Land. That's a Duel Links card you would know if you played Duel Links. Play a Necro Valley from your deck. That's kind of an issue, yes? If we keep on scrolling down, there are so many. We have this ideally for reacting to like a ban list video when this becomes more exciting every 4 to 6 weeks. So I know we're going to have a page that also auto updates with the full list in a much more better viewable way. I guess they forgot to put Sigma to 7 points. It was 0 freaking points. Now, what are the Math Mech cards overall? Let me type in Math Mech. Circular is obviously on what? Wait, what? Circular is 0 points? What? I did. Oh, wait. It's not a link. You can't link. You can't link. Okay. Well, you know, still, if we can get a Laplacian to be popping off with the Super Factorial, this would be kind of interesting. Okay. Sigma being the only card that is hit. Still quite jarring to see that. Now, Konami, with their 2 years of getting this ready, has even confused a card. This card is no usage data because no one uses this. Some random dude used it once in the TCG, and they confused this with Ohime. How did they do that? It's even, someone puts a comment going, they realize they hit the wrong Makonko ritual. Yeah, that looks embarrassing. That, I think, in a way shows a lot of incompetence. Now, I'm not trying to dunk on Konami, but you know, we got to point some things as they happen. They had to put Ohime to 33, my bad, whoopsie, as the Arahime is the incorrect one that was actually used. So what is going on there? Chinook, I guess we saw, I looked at this earlier, it went from 5 to 0 points. We have cards that decreased and cards that increased. People are also freaking out that Holly Sue, or there were no Vanquish Soul cards that had any point value. So even though their Link 1 monster is not usable in this format, but pretty much a full power beyond that Vanquish Soul Canine deck was playable. The transaction rollback, I heard some people talk about, why is this not on the list? And they didn't know about the dual, not the Duel Links combo, but the Master Duel combo. Sales ban and Numbers Avail. Numbers Avail and Sales ban, you declare Rongo, and then you special summon Rongo, then Rongo stays on the field forever, and it just super floodgates the game. So, whoops, they made that combo illegal. So I do think that this is nice to see, but it's also maybe a little bit worrying. Also, how seriously are they taking this format if a card like number 67 is 67 points? Now, this was 0 points, so very much needed to be on here, as you can see. And you know, it's not the only card at 67 points, so I guess we could say that. So in a way, it's funny, but also, are they just trolling? Because you know what's not funny? Spending $1,000 on a format like this, or spending hundreds of dollars to travel for a format like this, and also the fact that they could be balancing the format every 4 to 6 weeks. Are you kidding me? My tier 1 deck is going to be tier 3 in just 1 freaking month potentially. So let's look at that. Vanquish Soul Raisin. This was a part of a deck that was worth upwards of $1,000, and then it got limited to one on the ban list very recently. About 2 months after the deck became top tier, the deck is now worth about $400 to $300, only $300 to $400 when it was upwards of one freaking thousand. If we look at Raisin itself, sorry for the flashbang, look at the price drop. This was a $26 card, a 3 of, that now dropped all the way down to, as you can see here, $5 freaking bucks. So I don't, if I were a TCG player, I would not want to be jerked around on, let's say this announced this new format and I went all in on Vanquish Soul. I bought the cards, I got ready. Then 2 days later, now you're hitting the cards already. Okay, I'm going to go to Draco Tail. Oh, but then you also hit new Draco Tail cards. Okay, like, so what can you really trust? We're talking a lot of money and effort here. This is not Master Duel. You could willy-nilly decraft or rebuy whatever you want. And I do think that this may have an effect on the market. So in a way, it's twofold. I think the benefit of the Genesys format is they don't want the box that the new Vanquish Soul cards come from to go down in value, which would be the Holly Sue, which came out from the Alliance, Duelist Advanced, that is. And when this deck goes down in value in the TCG Modern game, if it could still at least be playable in Genesys, maybe this will retain its value and just overall be a net positive for Konami. But then I already mentioned the downside of, what if I just play Genesys and you're jerking me around with the ban list? I went all in on an Exodia deck and now it's no good? What the heck? Now, I don't feel bad for anyone right now that went all in onto any deck because this is just newly announced. But the problem is, once this really gets started with events, you know, are they not confident in their changes? I'm all for quick changes, but this is very quick. And I'm not being hypocritical where, oh, this happens in Mastodon Duel Links. Yeah, but there are measures put in place where you're not going to be hit that hard on your wallet for your deck getting hit, because you do have ways to get a full refund, specifically on the cards that do get hit, and you don't have that option in the TCG. So you tell me if you're one of those players that you're just a one deck player. I mean, you only go to a tournament once a week, right? You don't have enough money or time to play multiple different decks like you do in Mastodon. You go all in on one deck, and also the time you spend learning that deck to go down the tubes within 4 freaking weeks, that may be a problem. But from my angle, which I think is abnormal, I'm happy that they're changing this 4 to 6 weeks, but I can understand those that would not be happy about it. Now, what else we have here? With other changes, they had the Key 2 Draco Tail, which was a 0-point card if you wanted to go in on that, and then now it is worth 20 points. And then we already talked about the Holly Sue. Holly Sue now going up to 10 points. Now, the final question is, when is this coming to Mastodon? Can we expect this in Mastodon soon? Oh, how do I put this? Well, from all evidence I see, Konami Japan is not involved with this in any way whatsoever. Zero input. It has nothing to do with them, to the point where we have Japanese people online asking American players, or I should say English playing players, Europe included, saying, what is this? Konami Japan's not talking about it. Yeah, because it's not their thing. This is, I don't want to demean this, but it's essentially a pet project from a rep company that isn't actually the real Konami. Now, how can I say Konami NA is not the real Konami, or Konami EU and NA? They are representative companies. They're essentially the stepson of the real Konami. The real Konami makes the cards. The real Konami makes Mastodon. Now, Konami NA and EU, they don't know what's happening with Mastodon. They have zero input. They don't develop. They don't give any help. They're not even really given, as far as I know, unless they change it recently with the Live Twin potential teaser, they're not even told what's coming out in Mastodon. So that is what's concerning, in addition to what I said earlier, that isn't Speed Duel a TCG only thing? Wasn't the Battle Pack a TCG only thing? The Time Wizard's a TCG only thing. So we have 3 clear examples of TCG only things. If I think Speed Duel being on TCG only, correct me if I'm wrong on that, where is, yes, Speed Duel Yu-Gi-Oh! Is dead, where they have completely failed. And I think that that could make Konami from Japan even more hesitant to want to go in on this. They're probably like, all right, the Konami rep companies, they're bored. They're going to do something a little funny. And even though they claim they've been working on this for over 2 years, they did have to do a massive update where they didn't know that Exodia was good when you have all these draw cards in your deck in one, which is, I think, a huge blunder. They mixing up the Makonkos and the recent decks like Vanquish Soul and even some Canine cards and Draco Tail not being hit enough. So maybe that created some further player distrust of they're just trying to shill out the new decks. But I do think we should give Konami a chance with this. I'm all for it. How much I criticize Konami for. If I'm one of the biggest Konami criticizers and I think there's a chance with this, then I think that you should take a chance on them too. Now, I think one thing I forgot to address is, how interactive will this be? Where is that? Is this going to be non-interactive? Is this doomed to fail? Well, you tell me. What is one of the biggest problems of Yu-Gi-Oh? I would say one of the biggest problems is the disparity between going first and second. So if we even have an article on that, I think we call it the World Championship, World Champ number stats. Where are the stats? Championship stats, statistics. I actually can't freaking find it. There it is. WCS is what we called it. So within this, what the heck was this last year? 2025? Oh, okay. Did I mix up the things? Oh, my cheese, I can't find it, but that's okay. We have a deck like Malice and Ryzeal averaging a 70% win rate going first. That is not okay. And will that be fixed in a format like Genesys? Will the going first player have an even greater advantage? Because The problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the necessity of hand traps. Hand traps are needed. Hand traps are created because they made turn ones too powerful. And then the hand traps became so good, they had to make decks that were more powerful than the hand traps. Then they had to make even better hand traps more powerful than the previous ones to beat the new decks that beat the previous hand traps, to the point where they're making a card like Nibiru. And then with Nibiru helping balancing out the game, they now give all these decks ways to play around Nibiru. You have Gigantic Sprite that was making the Gigantic Sprite to that card itself to play around Nibiru. You have Rukalos to negate the Nibiru. Almost all the top tier decks have great plays around Nibiru, to the point where the game is almost just eating itself. And I don't really know if it's the answer to remove hand traps from the top decks when they were needed to keep the top decks in check. But again, they are also reducing the power ceiling of the top deck. So maybe that coinciding with the reduction of hand traps is exactly what we need. Now, that is to be seen. I think it would be great. I know Konami is shy, but how about they come out a bit more, be more vocal about what is their intent with this? Do they want a more interactive game? If I'm sitting there and turn one is making their play and I can't make any plays because I don't want to play hand traps, I know you're going to say, well, then play hand traps. Well, not if it's going to be a bad deck. If the good decks are playing hand traps, then great. But if it devolves into it's just every top deck and the hand traps are not playable, then that's going to be a problem. And you know what? If Konami could come forth and be like, if that's the case, then we'll adjust the format to where hand traps will be playable. But think about this. If that turns out to be a problem, that would mean that they would accidentally slowly balance Genesys to just be closely resembling modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And how do a lot of people view Duel Links and Speed Duel? As a lesser version of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! They even say that's the reason why they don't want to play Duel Links beyond it being pay to win, or at least perceived to be pay to win. And this is new and exciting right now because it's unsolved. But once this becomes solved, once people see it for what it possibly is going to become as just a lesser version of Yu-Gi-Oh!, maybe an even more imbalanced and less fun version, that's where this is just going to fall flat on its face. People are not going to want to invest their traveling and money into this. And it will just be another thing that has failed. And hopefully it's not. Hopefully this does well in my community tournament this Sunday. Hopefully Konami Japan also adopts this if it does well overall with the community feedback and people enjoying this, because I would want more than ever for this to be a real thing. And even more so, I want Konami Japan to give us a true classic mode in Master Duel. I think that's going to be the best thing for Master Duel in addition to something possibly like this. And that's all I got on this. Thank you very much. Let's go.